Why you gotta do me like that?
Hey, it's Carrie, and I would love to hear from you. Share your story with us on the platform. You're listening to Camouflaged Beauty, a podcast of shared experiences for military and veteran women. Hello. It's Carrie, and I am back with the Camouflage Beauty. We are here with another amazing woman. Duh, that's what we do. So this episode is extremely special to me. I connected with Shay on social media, and she was gracious enough to come and share her story with us. It's a vulnerable story indeed, but this is an example of leadership. So recently retired Shay Potter has all the leadership qualities of a U.S. Army officer. In many ways, she served proudly, yet she also served silently. We're going to bring her on now so you can meet her as well. Shay, how are you?
Hey, how you doing, Carrie? And to the listeners, how's everyone doing?
Good. I'm so glad that you're here to share this story with us. So before we get kicked off in this a bit, tell the listeners about a bit about your military affiliation.
Yeah, so I served 20 years as a military intelligence officer, basically all over the United States, several countries outside of the states, like many military members, several deployments. My career actually started right after 9/11. 6 days later, I was in the intelligence officer basic course. 6 months later, I was inside the lands of Afghanistan. And my carousel continued. Afghanistan, Iraq, Korea, back to Afghanistan. And before I knew it, 18 years had passed by. And that's when I made the decision that, for me, I was ready to do something different, but more importantly, my parents were getting into their senior ages. They're 79 and 77 now. And I was looking at where I was in my career and saying, this is all well and good, but I'm losing time with folks who aren't going to be here forever while I'm chasing something that may or may not be worth it. And so at the year 18, I talked to my command and decided that I was submitting my paperwork. And this past September 30th was my final day in the uniform. And I couldn't be more happier at this point. And so, like I said, I had a very good career, but I am around family and doing the things that I ultimately want to do at this point in my life. So that's really it, kind of in a nutshell.
No, that's amazing. Yeah. So an amazing service, 6 days after 9/11. So yeah, you chose to be here, when things got really rough, you're like, yeah, I could do that. And you stuck it out for 20 years. So first of all, thank you so much for your service and for your leadership and setting that example for many others to follow. So that gives us a little bit about your professional background, but who is Shay?
Yeah. So it's not very simple, but I strive for simplicity. I think Shay now is who they're going to be, and I purposely use the pronoun there, which we'll talk about that later. But for me, it literally took about 40 years to find who Shay is, who Shay will be, and who Shay will take their last breath as. And that was a battle. So to quickly answer your question, I think Shay, me, is a lot of things. And right now, I'm a writer. I'm coming more into my creative space. Writing, I've been writing since I was young, but I moved away from it and now I'm coming back to it. I think I'm more creative than I gave myself credit for. And maybe that had to do with the type of career that I had, which was very focused on being analytical, very logical in thought patterns. And I'm finding that I have this whole other side of myself. And then I think I'm still exploring. For me, like I said, I'm 43. I just turned 43 October 18th. So I am giving myself the space to continue to find out more who Shay is. Because for 20 years, I've been Lieutenant Colonel Potter in every rank before that, and trying to fit that mode in what a Captain Potter looks like, what a Major Potter looks like, and then what a Lieutenant Colonel Potter looks like. And so now I'm kind of 3 years, really kind of 1.5 of asking myself, okay, what does a Shay Potter look like? And not necessarily defining that, but just kind of living in that space and just experiencing the newness of it.
Beautiful. So every rank in the officer corps, all the way up to Lieutenant Colonel. Let's talk about some of the struggles that you may have faced throughout your career. Did you ever feel like you fit in to the status quo and the box that was created for you in the Army?
I didn't think about it. I'm going to be real, I didn't come out in terms of my sexuality until I was about 35. And then I had kind of a second come out in terms of my gender identity around 38, 40. So before then, it was, like I said, 9/11 happened. It was, hey, I need to learn some skills because I'm going to likely be in a war or a combat environment. Mm-hmm. And it was, okay, this is what everyone else is doing. Okay, let's do that. It was survival mode. Yeah. I just didn't have a chance to really say to myself, do I fit in or don't I? To be quite honest with you, I don't think I had the personality then to really try to stick out because of, like I said, I was trying to survive. And then also being an officer, a Black officer at that, how much sticking out do you really want to do? Mm-hmm. Look at me, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, okay, well, on that front, you already stick out. But do you really want to start adding all these other different nuances to really stick out from the fold when you just started your career? And so no, to answer your question, I just sort of fell in line and did what everyone else did. And as far as my feelings and how I felt, and if I felt any different or however that, I didn't give myself a chance to feel those things. Not that young. I didn't do that.
Yeah. That's a difficult way to survive, and for 20 years or, at least most of that 20-year career as well. And so I know you didn't come out per se, your first coming out until, your mid 30s. But before coming out, right, did you, internalize, know for yourself who you were, or at least exploring that idea and how was that coming out for you in the military? Were you afraid somewhat of how they would treat you because of this this disclosure?
I think the real question is for me is what was trying to live an image through what I was being taught at church and my family. Military was there, but it was, I grew up on a very strict upbringing and just really trying to uphold a image or a reputation as being a Potter, right? There's high expectations for me. And so that was where my mind was. And then I was also really into the church. And I think it was always that confliction of wanting to be good, right? I had that type of personality where I didn't want to be bad in any way. So, you can probably tell by my demeanor, I was very quiet and just really just trying to do the right thing. So, any feelings that I started to have more in the sexual intimacy side of the house, I think when I was younger, I just didn't know what those were because talk about a late bloomer. I didn't date or have my first boyfriend until I was in my mid 20s. And again, it was just, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
So let me try it. I don't know what I like. So I went out and got a boyfriend, right?
Right.
That's what everyone is telling me I'm supposed to do. So I did it. Didn't work out very well. But I did it. And then, like I said, once I was in the military, I really try to keep that separate because the military, to me, in my mind, I really just sort of put that in a category or some type of box that you don't bring feelings there, right? It's a job. So it doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't matter who I am. It's, dude, put the uniform on. And it really felt like it was like a superhero mode. You put the cape on and then you just become whatever is on your name tag.
Yeah.
Right. Until you come home and you take it off and you're like, oh, okay. Who's this person?
Yeah.
So yeah, and I hate to dance around it, but I'm just trying to explain to people that sometimes, you have people out there that honestly, they're just trying to figure it out. Like they don't have all the answers. And it seems like, okay, you got 12-year-olds that seem to have all the answers. Well, I didn't have a lot of answers at 12. I didn't have a lot of answers at 25, but I lived a very sheltered life. I lived a very privileged life. And so I could afford to just sort of be in this bubbled world and not necessarily be bombasted by all the realities of life. And I had to figure those things out, to include trying to survive being a Black officer in military intelligence that doesn't really have any Black officers, really, senior officers, so there's a lot going on. And hopefully people can understand that sometimes life is not as clear cut as we may want it to be. It is truly exploration if we're honest with ourselves.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about your experience as a senior officer, your opportunity, really, right? Not many, you're among the few. What was that space like for you?
I'm going to ask you to expound a little bit on what do you mean by the space?
Just in general, you, like you said, there are not a lot of Black senior officers in the intelligence world. And so it almost seems like it would come with a sense of responsibility, right? For you to be that shining star, that guiding hope for others, striving to be that, to say, oh, I can be an incel. I can do that. So what was that space like for you?
So, one being the only or one of the few, I got used to that in college. So I went to Purdue University, and my first experience was walking into an auditorium. There had to be about 300, 400. It felt like 8,000 people because I'm an introvert, and all white faces. I might have saw a dot or two.
Wow.
And so 5 years of that, you get very used. So like I said, I grew up in California. I went to school in Indiana. And then I went to a school that was predominantly white. And then the Black population was about 1%. The school had close to about 50,000 students. So you can kind of do the math of how many Black people were there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then I had the additional culture of mostly Midwesterners, country music, hunting, the typical, white culture, right? And so, in other words, I was introduced to the same culture that I will be serving with
Mm-hmm.
in college. So I have 5 years of just trying to figure that out. And so when I got into the military and I was assigned as a military intelligence officer, and then I walked 6 days later after 9/11 into my class, and long and behold, guess what? Just a
Yeah.
few dots in a class, right? I've dealt with that for 5 years. And then when I became a senior officer and moved through the ranks, again, I'm used to this. This has been my world since I was 17 years old. Now, as far as being an example, um, really taking ownership of where you are, that's a little bit more complicated. And it's complicated because I haven't found my voice yet. I don't really know who I am. I don't really know who I really want to be. I am still sort of grappling for examples and saying, okay, that's the leadership model. Okay, so I'm going to try to do that, or okay, I'm going to try to do that over there, right? All these things, instead of saying, no, Shay, this is who you are, right? You bring this forth. It was me trying all these different cloaks and jackets of otherness and putting that onto me and trying to fit into that, right? So it took me until, like I say, my last maybe 5 years where I was more comfortable with myself to actually assert myself, assert my ideas, assert my thoughts, and then also be open with who I am and what I represent, and then walk boldly in that as I'm walking down the halls, so that I can be that exampleship for some of the younger folks that are coming through. So like I said, it just took a while. It took a while. I'm untangling a lot of little things, but I just trying to communicate that from day one, I just wasn't there.
See, I love that. And I think outside of your gender identity, just in general, right? Just in the space that we are, I think it's what you just said is extremely important because yeah, we don't have all the answers, right? And you do try to fit on a cloak each year, each rank, each time, as you try to figure out what leadership looks like and how you can kind of morph into take a little from here and there and create your own legacy of leadership. So I think it's important for our listeners to hear that and understand that, because the struggle is real.
Yeah, it is real. It's real.
And no one tells you that when you just come in, right? It's like, hey, especially you make certain ranks and they're like, you're a leader. You're like, oh, okay. I don't really know how to do this leadership thing, but okay, whatever. I'll try this on for size and see what it looks like. So yeah, so you're here and your time at Purdue prepared you for being among the few. And you're trying to try it on different cloaks to figure out who you are and how you fit into this status quo of the service of a senior officer in the Army. How did you survive the two lives, essentially, right? Because you're one in uniform. You go home, you take the superhero cape off, and now you have to sit with you, just you.
Yeah. I'm gonna say I think in this matter, I think I set up different, and what I mean by that is I didn't give myself a chance to feel. I just be quite honest with you. And I'm still struggling with that today because it's very hard for me to just express what I'm feeling or be in touch with feelings. It's like, what's that?
Yeah.
And I probably do have a little bit of dissociative trauma, if you will, where for so long, I just never allow myself to feel. It's if you know my eyes were getting ready to well up or I felt some type of way, I would just like stop myself. Like, we don't do that. We don't have feelings, and it wasn't the world was telling me that, it was me, because I had in my mind that, what I thought about being tough and, things that I need to do, and the world's not fair, and, this, that, and the other. And so basically people, what they would say was had a very stoic, cold, type of presence, very distant. And still to this day, like I say, I'm not very much a hugger. I'm learning how to do those things, right? And so, like, again, I'm explaining this because it will help you understand, and your listeners to understand that, coming through the Army, I did not allow myself to feel. I didn't allow myself to emote. I just was a fraction, truly a fraction of being a human. And I did that to myself for a number of reasons, but for survival. And so my sexuality, who I like, what makes me happy, all those things, I just stuffed somewhere and locked away that key. So there isn't much to go back on, because I just didn't allow myself to have those, to have those desires. And so when I went home, I studied technical manuals. I worked out. Like I said, it wasn't anything there. I'm being honest. I'm being really honest. Friends, I didn't allow people to come home or to my home. I barely hung out. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I mean when I started this, and I said that at 43, I am just now starting to answer that question, who's Shay?
Yeah.
So, and I'm being truly honest. That's just where it is. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still trying to pour the colors and see what happens on a blank white canvas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it really sounds like you said it, hit the nail on the head. You didn't allow yourself to feel. And sometimes those things that we tell ourselves are more damaging than, what the world tells us, right? So that fear of what we think or how we're going to be judged sometimes drives everything about our lives. So with that, typically comes other things, long-term negative impacts that we may not even recognize right away. Did this affect you emotionally, mentally, in any way?
Yeah, besides the fact that I struggle a little bit with social anxiety, like I said, I have a tough time. This is where like relationships and stuff like that, because you have to be vulnerable and you have to feel your emotions and all that type of stuff.
And hugs.
I'm like, I'm not really down for that. Let's I don't know, go do something else. No. So yeah, on an emotional side, and I think people that get to know me, or not even get to know me, they just meet me, the first thing is like, oh, okay, I'm kind of weird, and I recognize that, but I can't change that. I recognize it. That's something that I have to work on. Whether I have to, try to get help or something like that. But yeah, that's, I would say, the consequence of being able to detach myself for so long from some of the realities of how you're actually feeling about a situation.
Mm-hmm.
Acknowledging that that's real, and then giving yourself space to feel it, to work through it, instead of just cutting all that stuff off, right? Um, so yeah, that's probably the effect. But I mean, I say all this, I'm not crazy, right? But yeah, I do have some
We're
latent
all a
type
little
stuff,
crazy. Let's be honest, right?
right? But yeah, I'm a loner. I admit that. But that's just because it's comfortable, it's safe. I don't have to worry about, putting anyone in an uncomfortable position. And I probably got to work on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, I think we all have to work on something. All right.
Yeah.
So, hey, at least you recognize what it is that you have to work on. The rest of us out here just know something's wrong, but we can't quite pinpoint what it is. We're
Yeah,
like, wait a
right.
minute, something ain't right, because people keep looking at me like a weirdo, but I just don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But seriously, getting back to your sexuality, your gender identity, explain that to us a bit. So this is as especially for those of us in uniform, as we are growing and learning more about this topic particularly. I think a lot of us struggle in that area. We don't really know how to best support someone who may be in this space. Not quite sure. I think we like black and white. Tell us what you are, how we can support you. We don't really operate in the gray, or we don't know how to.
Yeah.
But we kind of need to learn how to, for empathy, to support that person, because it's probably not easy for them. So can you shed some light on that a bit?
Totally. I would say, for those that want to know, they're already doing the things that they need to do to help others work through that space. And part of it is, like what you said, is empathy, but it's stepping outside of your bubble and how you see the world and how you engage the world, and recognize that there's another inject point, or multiple inject points, that we come into the same space in the world and end up having different experiences. It's kind of like, I speak in a lot of imagery. So there's a car accident on the corner street. There's 5 witnesses. You're going to have 5 different perspectives of what happened before the 2 cars crash, and it's based on what they brought to that situation, their angle, and how they saw that situation, right? And the values and things of that nature that kind of shape that. And we do the same thing when we are trying to understand and interact with other people. And oftentimes we bring our own experiences and we try to cloud that, or force others to sort of walk in the same path and live the same walk that we like. And if they don't, then we tend to want to thrust that to the side, right? And so the best thing that I can offer to people is, if come into the situation with what I call a blank canvas. Don't try to pre-paint. don't just come into the situation open, clear, right? Willing to listen. And if you're not in that space to do so, then I would say to keep doing what you're prone to do, because you're not ready. Because when folks that do and still are grappling with their sexuality and gender identity start speaking to you, it's going to sound like Greek, and it's going to, if you're not coming in with the right frame of mind, the right heart, then you're going to cloud them as crazy. And that is just going to thrust more trauma on that person, right? Now, the other part of it is, we live in a world that's very, it's a world of polarity. And from a sense of understanding the human mind and understanding, we've oversimplified the world so that, for our own comfort, right? It's easier to understand Black, That's it. You know, male, female. That's it. Hot, cold, north, south. Easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would challenge those that are listening to say that I feel like our world is much grander than that. I think it's much more amazing than that. And where I find that is that if you can take a step back and look at all the things between those polarities that I just named, and be open to the different colors and the different mixes and the different sounds that are made in that middle spectrum between the two polar opposites. I think that if you open yourself up, you will find how great this world is. Now, where am I going with this? I identify as gender fluid. And so the struggle for me, which gets back to a couple of questions of what did you struggle with? The biggest struggle for me is trying to fit in. The world was telling me that, okay, you got Y chromosomes, you're a female. Okay, so I'm supposed to like pink, and I'm supposed to like dolls, and I'm supposed to cross my legs and speak only when spoken to, and like painting my nails and all those things. I hated all that crap. But for personality, for me, it was like, what's wrong with me?
Mm.
If I'm this way, I'm supposed to like these things. I don't like those things. I don't identify with those things. What's wrong with me? Mom, what's wrong with me? Right? Couldn't answer that. And then you hang out with the boys, you like the boys, you like how they talk. Like, okay, this feels a little bit better, but then there's something still quite off. Like, I really like you guys, but I don't quite, me personally, feel like that's the space that I want to ascribe to either. So again, what's wrong with me? Right? We live in a polar world. So I don't feel quite female. I don't feel quite male. Well, what else is there, right? Because we don't have a language yet. We don't have a language to describe the wonderful grayness between it, right? We do now. One of them is trans. One of them is gender fluidity. There's intersex. There's all these wonderful terms that we have now to say, hey, wow, there's all this stuff in the middle. So there isn't anything wrong with me. I see now that it's okay to exist in this middle. And it's not that you're thrown away because there isn't any category for you to fit in, but that's where you're supposed to be. So I tend to also describe gender fluidity as more energy, maybe a little bit more simpler. I exude a lot of masculine energy in my thoughts and my mannerisms and in the things that I gravitate to. But my entire existence, I've been taught to shun that. That's just naturally where I am, right? And so what does that look like? It looks like me standing in the mirror with the dress for hours trying to practice how to be female. And then being deathly afraid that if I walked out of that room and I walked into that hallway, someone was going to find me out because I felt fake, right? And so it looks like you sitting in the pews and it looks like your head is saying, Shay, cross your legs. Shay, put your hands flat. Shay, look at your mom. Whatever she does, repeat what she does. Shay, this is the soundtrack that's going in my head because I'm trying to play a part. I'm trying to be believable because in my mind, this is all makeup and costumes to me. You see what I'm saying? So it's just that natural masculine energy that I've been taught to suppress. And so I went through about where, like I said, I went through that stage of joining a sorority because I was like, well, if I join a sorority and I'm surrounded by females, maybe I can get what they got. And then I'll be more female. It's like it's perfume, like, you know, I could just step into it.
Oh,
You know what I
man.
mean? Right? But it didn't happen because it was just like, this ain't it. This ain't it, Shay. It's not it. This is not you. And so I went from the dresses, the makeups, the high heels, all of that to say this is just not it. To stepping back and saying, okay, we got to try to figure this thing out. So I do have some feminine energy, which I ascribe to a lot of my creativity. Not to get too graphic, but you know, my sexual energy tends to gravitate towards being more feminine at times. So, you know, as I got older, I said, okay, well, do I shun that? Do I shun that? Because now that I'm presenting male, and then I said, wait a minute, why am I shunning pieces of myself to better fit into something that you have no business chopping off your leg, chopping off your arm to try to fit into? So I bring this home to say that's why I say I'm gender fluid, because it allows me to just wake up and be.
Yeah.
So if it's feminine energy, guess what? That's what you're going to get. And then 2 hours later, if you see me just like half leaning on a chair or something like that, that's more masculine, and you're scratching your head, dude, I'm like the wind. And I like that because now it's that I've been able to unlock trying to figure out the script that I was giving myself to live by, to just being. And however it is that I feel, I'm allowed to be myself. So that's, I know, a long way to kind of explain gender fluidity and what that means to me, but hopefully that gives enough visual cues of what that means. And that's separate from, for people that are trying to understand it, that's separate from the sexual intimacy side, right? I just explained to you my presentation, my social interaction with the world. Who I sleep with, that's a whole nother problem set. And I think people conflate the two, right? But they're different. They're vastly different. And this is by no way arguing the fact that that's why I started off with biology. Yes, biologically, science says I'm a woman, but do I identify with the term woman or any woman adjectives? No, I don't. I don't like it, to be quite honest. But I deal with it because that's what I've kind of walked into in terms of life, and understand why that is. But then when I do get into spaces that I'm comfortable with to have the conversation and the people are receptive, then I'll start peeling back the layers. But I don't feel like it's something that you need to sort of burst into a room, an open code room, right? And start waving your flag and saying, this is
here I am.
Right. You know, it's like, whoa, wasn't ready. Right. So yeah, that's it.
No, but you know what, and first of all, your explanation was perfect. And it's beautiful to really, what I'm hearing you say is just having the permission to be whatever that is in whatever space you choose on any given day, just a permission to be. So, we're joking about, bursting in the room and saying, hey, look at me, this is who I am, and there's some people who are doing that. And, kudos to them as well, right? Because I don't know how they feel, but I'm sure it's tiring, to kind of try to fit a mold after a while, some people could just probably be like, you know what? Hello, this is who I am. Here's your list, just to, because I think, like the conversation is going to come up, or they feel like the conversation is going to come up. So they kind of try to get ahead of it with that burst in the room effect. And if that's what they need to get it out there for them to feel empowered to do that, I'm here for it. I'm all here for it, especially those of us in uniform, right? Because it's a new space. It's a new space for these people. And I can't imagine what it is that they are struggling with or experiencing or trying to explain that to people when they're trying to understand it for themselves as well. So
I would add to anyone that is in uniform, my method, and like, Carrie said, you have those that are definitely a lot more extroverted, but my method was I learned to walk boldly in who I was. So I basically rocked a really short Caesar haircut, kind of like a high top fade. I was out, right? But I allowed people to feel comfortable enough to come to me and open the conversation. So it was very approachable, because I felt like that's when the real learning and real conversation can happen, as opposed to me coming in and, being very ill-timed in my approach, if that makes sense. So there are many ways to be bold and being present in who you are, right? Not hiding who you are. But I still feel like there's a time and a place where you can really start having meaningful conversations. And oftentimes I found those were when others were ready to receive, right? And so it could have started something as we're having lunch and we're around the table. Like I remember when I was we were in Afghanistan. There was an Australian guy, three American guys. And, we had beer, pizza, whatever, or the fake beer, forgot what they call it out there, because you couldn't drink on the whatever. And one of the guys is like, Shay, you could tell he was trying to ease into the conversation. Like, we were just trying to wonder, he was just like stumbling all over. I was like, you trying to wonder if I'm gay or not, aren't you? It was like, yeah, and everyone kind of laughed and I laughed, and, I kept it light, and I was upfront with them, and I just let them ask questions, no matter how crazy they were, because I can tell that they were curious. And learning comes through curiosity, and it's when you shut it down or you kind of attack that. So I'm not saying that has to be your approach to help people that work around you to understand you a little bit, but understand that you want that curiosity. And the question is, how do you help feed that where it's not damaging to you, right? It's no different than with race. You have to find that balance where, again, you're not damaging yourself for someone else's education. And I think you can tell the difference when it's genuine curiosity of someone who's just trying to be better by understanding how to be better, and they're coming to you to try to help walk that walk, versus someone that's just, playing you. So hopefully that helps out for those that, maybe I'm trying to figure out that line to walk.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. So as we get ready to wrap up here, I have a few last questions for you. And just overall, as a leader, what are your leadership nuggets that you want to leave with our listeners today?
Yeah, the main one is find your voice, own your voice, and harness the hell out of it. That sounds easier said than done. For the quiet types, I can only really speak towards the introverts, because I think sometimes we have a little bit more of a struggle than the extroverts in finding our voice. I think in the military, especially for those that are aspiring to be either senior enlisted, warrant officers, definitely officers as young as possible, because you're pretty much in a leadership position. Voice is so important. The problem with the military right now is that we have a dominance of one voice that gets heard, one voice that gets attended to. And that one voice carries across the world, wherever we go. It dictates how we interact with the rest of the world, the things that we do. And that may not always be right. We probably could have handled Iraq and Afghanistan a little bit differently. But again, it was one voice that decided this is how we're going to move out. And so you go, Shay, well, I'm just a staff sergeant or I'm just a lieutenant. How do I get my voice heard? Well, you get your voice heard where you are. Because if you're a staff sergeant, that means you have privates and sergeants that are looking to you for leadership. If you're a lieutenant, that means you have a platoon or a section that's looking to you for leadership. That's a chance to exercise your voice and practice and walk it. What I mean by that is I always say that your audio and video should match. You know how your mom will tell you not to do something, right? You couldn't do it. And then 2 days later, you see her doing it with her friends and you're like,
Wait a minute.
So make sure your audio matches your video, but you can hone it where you are. You can hone it with one person, right? The voice, the other part of the voice is the authenticity of it. And so you heard me earlier talking about putting on all these cloaks and trying to do a little bit of this and a lot of this and a lot of that. But all those things weren't me. Finding your authenticity and projecting that through who you are is ultimately where I'm going with your voice when I'm talking about your voice. So that means that if you're quiet, you can lead through being quiet. I mean, you got to speak up, right? But you don't have to yell. You don't have to cuss. You don't have to espouse ideas and beliefs that's not you. You can do the very opposite. And you can present yourself in such a calming and authoritative way that your leadership or the people within your leadership will turn to you. Usually what will happen with me is I will let everyone else speak because I was a believer in letting as many voices as possible come to the fold. And I will remain quiet. But it was very clear that I was the leader. And then at the end, people will turn to me because it was like, wow, we haven't heard anything from you. That's a chance to exercise your voice. What are you going to say? The last thing I would say is for those that stay in long enough, 10, 15 years, 20, 25, you're going to find yourself in some very privileged, closed door, special dark rooms, and so on and so forth. If you're brown skinned, if you're, a different ethnic group than the majority, my question is, what are you going to do? How are you going to take that opportunity? How are you going to engage inside that opportunity to represent the group that you're a part of? I didn't do the right things in those spaces because I allowed myself to sort of clamp down on my voice. But there were plenty of opportunities where I could have stood up, not necessarily like literally, but said, hey, you guys are talking about X, Y, Z. Have you thought about A and B? And here's why. Because A and B represents the minorities that are in this unit, and that's going to be just as impactful as what you're talking about. I just want to make sure that we're considering all options and not just a small, narrow group. And so that's what I mean by putting yourself in that position when you're in those closed door spaces to offer up ideas, make sure they're sound ideas, they've been researched, being brave enough to offer those up and make sure that they're a part of the conversations. That's how I would attack that if I were still in.
Perfectly said. And speaking of still being in, I want to leave this with the listeners. Your final thoughts, all things considered, your journey, what you know about yourself now, and what you hope to be in the future. If you had the opportunity to go back, would you join the U.S. Army again?
Today?
Yes.
With everything that I know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be a struggle. I mean, I would say today, because of the frame of mind that I'm in, I will probably consider a different career. But then I have to also say that the person that I am today was also shaped by the 20 years that I've been in. And I've had a good career, but being honest with myself, the military was good, but I think there was something better. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, no, I got you. Yeah, it's an option, but it's not the only option.
Yeah, but if you're in it, I will tell your listeners, if you're in it and you decided to make it a career, right, you need to give it 100%. Mm-hmm. If you're not at 100%, you're not 100% feeling it, please consider something else. And I'm telling you this because it can't be selfish. You have to be there for those that are serving as your subordinates. I'm sorry, this is not something that that's supposed to scratch your itch, so to speak, or something that you should just be in and sort of buy time. It's serious business, and also the impacts and the reach that you have on the next generation, those that are coming up, is just too great. So if you're in it, be there 100%. That's definitely something I put out.
For sure. Lieutenant Colonel Shay Potter, mm-hmm. retired. Who is Shay now?
Yeah. I would say Shay is bold, quietly bold. Got to put that quiet in there. Shay is more clear-minded in where they're going, and Shay is really excited to grow into the person that they're meant to be, and finally be in a space that they can grow. That's really exciting, because I look forward to what that's going to look like.
Absolutely. And we look forward. We'll be watching you and following you along your journey as an author and everything else that you strive to do. It's been my absolute pleasure interviewing you today. Thank you so much for joining us on the platform.
Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate it.
Of course. And hopefully you'll come back, because as life changes for you and as you grow, I am interested to keep up with your story and your journey and see what's next.
Definitely. I'm on all social media, Shay D Potter. You see my name at the bottom there. So if you want to follow, what I have going on, there you go.
Absolutely. And I'll make sure that I share that on our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You know where to find us. And of course, on every major platform for podcasting. It's been my pleasure. And again, happy Friday, y'all. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. You can find us on the book, IG, or Twitter. Email us your stories to camobeautystories@gmail.com. That's it for me, y'all. Until next time, be kind to your body, soul, and mind.